Hi, everyone. Thank you, Thea, Stephanie, Kanomi, and Susan for your thoughtful and thought-provoking roundtable discussion this week. You've inspired a lot of questions and dialogue in the forums that I would like to stay with and continue thinking about. Through these past weeks, we've been unpacking heteronormativity and patriarchy as it lives within Canada as a neocolonial state. And as we do this, I'm reminded of Spivak's work that highlights how patriarchal logics have significant implications on the social distribution of power, and as Spivak writes, allows certain noise to be heard. So in this course, I'm curious about how we might better hear this noise and where it comes from and with whom it speaks. The ways in which power is exercised in the 21st century in Canada is very different than 40 years ago. For example, when oppression and segregation of peoples according to their race, gender, socioeconomic status was perhaps more physically visible for some people in everyday life. Yet, during that time, oppression was often unquestioned because it operated within socially constructed norms. It was so familiar that it was normalized, and violence was acceptable. Though through our readings and discussions, I'm hoping to challenge you in this course to consider how common assumptions continue to veil racist, gendered, and classist rationalities today. That these issues are not gone. And I think that this first requires that we notice what our common assumptions are, which assumptions might be so familiar that perhaps we're taking them for granted, and consider where they come from and what do these common assumptions reinforce. And I think this is the basis of feminist thought, that the personal is political and that questioning personal beliefs is simultaneously a political question. So in the article this week by Miners, she discusses the image of the Lady Bountiful in education. She draws on Holly Bow to unpack heterosexuality as it lives in close relationship with whiteness and patriarchy. She writes, quote, "We're raised to become masculine or feminine, and any rebellion against that still takes place within a constructed system of gender and erotic binaries, at least in white America. Our religions, our languages, our political theories, our family trees, our wars, our sciences, our work, and our categories of study have been bent to the task of creating and sustaining a gendered world of biologically specific people who we agree to call men or women. Sexual orientation is one of the pillars of that gender system, one of its most useful and necessary limbs. Heterosexuality is the core. To begin to question this complex set of systems is to begin a journey away from all the concepts used to structure the universe of common human experience we have developed as a nation." End quote. So as I visit with your responses this week, what I'd like to highlight is that though in Canada we may not notice the ways in which oppression continues to live, it exists, but in ways that are very specific to the condition of our time. Neocolonialism in Canada thrives through seemingly invisible structures, which guide our practices and the ways in which we live our lives. It's sometimes noticed in moments of microaggression, little bits of racial, gendered comments or responses that provoke discomfort, but may often go unacknowledged or unchallenged out of fear of creating a bigger problem. And I think Sarah Ahmed writes about this very well and deeply, these seemingly small everyday moments in life when in the midst of the smoothness of common assumption and happiness, something is jerked and we're provoked to respond. A small comment, for example, a comment at the dinner table that if we were to challenge it, it might become a bigger argument, and the person who challenges this comment, especially if she's a woman or somebody in a minority and ethnic group, then becomes the problem. Here, social problems become located within the individual body who is challenging them. the person then becomes the problem as opposed to the social issues that this person is pointing out. So gender equality then is not only about differences in pay between men and women, but also the structures that propel whose knowledge is valued and trusted as legitimate. And as Astrid questioned this week, what kind of work is largely valued as legitimate? Early childhood education, I think, is a prime example of a field associated with female qualities of nurture, care, that receive little social value in the form of wages and respect, as opposed to perhaps somebody in law, medicine, science and technology, careers that are often associated with stronger, more scientific legitimacy, assurance, and an essence of masculinity, where the illusion of a separation from the self, a separation of the self from the work, promotes a trust in the accuracy of this work. And this legitimacy through emotional or affective separation not only veils the gendered histories which create these frameworks of scientific knowledge in the first place, but also dismisses knowledges commonly associated with femininity. So the binaries between masculine and feminine life are further solidified through these discourses. Sometimes gender discourses become visible when we notice who has the right to speak, and when we notice in a group of people who most often holds the power and influence over the group, who speaks the most and with what assurance. And it's also visible in the dominant structures of family life and care and how these family roles create possibilities for who one can be and become. As we've discussed at the beginning of this course, these discourses are exercised not only visibly in the physical realm, but they also live virtually through our subjectivities and the discourses that we manifest in our daily lives. So noticing these discourses and the ways they shape our subjectivities requires us to think beyond the shiny, happy surfaces of habitual comfort thought and to ask the feminist question, to interrogate things that we assume to be true, and with, as Thea highlights in the roundtable this week, an essence of vulnerability. To be open to unpacking our implication in maintaining heteropatriarchy and colonialism by noticing and interrogating how we may continue to benefit from it.